The air inside the drop bay of the heavy cruiser Indomitable tasted of recycled ozone, stale coffee, and the metallic tang of gun oil. It was a smell Commander Elias Thorne had known for 20 years. It was the smell of waiting. Elias sat on a reinforced bench, the magnetic clamps of his boots locked to the deck plating. Around him, the 50 men and women of the Terran Vanguard 7th Battalion went through their final rituals. To his left, Sergeant Miller was methodically sharpening a combat knife. The rasp of the whetstone against the steel was rhythmic, almost hypnotic. Miller was a mountain of a man, a veteran of the Siege of Titan, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite and left in a sandstorm. To his right, a young corporal named Kovic was shaking. It was a subtle vibration, just the trembling of his hands as he tried to adjust the seal on his helmet. Kovic was 19. This was his first drop. Elias reached out, his gauntlet hand clamping onto the boy's shoulder. The heavy green armor of the Vanguard hummed slightly with the power of its servos. "Breathe, Kovic," Elias said. His voice was deep, a baritone rumble that cut through the low hum of the ship's engines. Kovic jumped, looking up with wide, terrified eyes. "Commander." I'm ready, sir. Just the adrenaline." "Adrenaline is good," Elias said, checking the power readouts on his own pulse rifle. "Adrenaline keeps you fast. Panic makes you dead. Know the difference?" "Yes, sir." Kovic took a deep breath, closing his eyes. Elias stood up. The servos in his leg armor whined softly. At 6'4", he towered over most of the deck crew. He wasn't the strongest man in the unit. That was Miller. He wasn't the fastest. But he was the anchor. He was the Iron Legionnaire, a title earned not by the medals on his chest, but by the scars underneath his armor. He walked to the center of the bay. The chatter died down. 50 helmets turned toward him. Visors were opaque, but he knew the faces behind them. He knew their wives' names. He knew who owed money on poker debts. He knew who was writing a letter home that they hoped would never be sent. 2 minutes to drop. The pilot's voice crackled over the ship-wide intercom. "Entering the atmosphere of Ethelgard. Expect turbulence. The weather down there is nasty." Elias tapped his comms bead, linking into the squad channel. "Listen up," Elias said. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. The Synod believes that war is a math equation. They believe that because their shields are plasma-based and their armor is ceramic composite, they have already calculated the outcome of this battle. He paced the line, looking at the battered, painted armor of his soldiers. Some had scratched tally marks into their pauldrons. Others had painted sharks' teeth on their helmets. "They look at us, and they see primitives," Elias continued. "They see kinetic weapons. They see chemical explosives. They see flesh and blood. They think we are soft." Miller chuckled, a low, dry sound. "Let's show 'em how soft we are, boss. We are the Vanguard." Elias's voice rose, gaining an edge of steel. "We are the hammer that strikes when the shield fails. We do not fight for the politics of the core worlds. We do not fight for the profit margins of the trade guilds. We fight for the silence." He paused. The ship shuddered violently as it hit the upper atmosphere. The lights in the bay flickered red. "We fight for the silence of the homes behind us," Elias roared over the shaking of the hull. "For the sleeping children who will never know the sound of an orbital bombardment. We hold the line so they don't have to. Strength and honor." The response was immediate. 50 voices screamed in unison, a sound primal enough to drown out the engines. "Strength and honor. Pod." Elias barked. The drill took over. The soldiers scrambled into their individual drop pods. These weren't the comfortable shuttles used by the rich. These were coffins made of tungsten and heat shielding. You stepped in, the harness crushed you against the back wall, and you prayed the retro rockets fired before you turned into a crater. Elias strapped himself in. The harness locked across his chest with a heavy clunk. The door hissed shut, sealing him in darkness. The only light came from the tactical display on his visor. A countdown timer flashed in green. 0:10, 0:05. "See you on the ground, Miller," Elias whispered. "Midnight. Drop." The stomach-churning sensation of weightlessness lasted for a heartbeat, followed instantly by the brutal slam of acceleration. The pod was fired out of the ship like a bullet. Elias gritted his teeth, fighting the G-forces that tried to push his eyes into the back of his skull. The temperature inside the pod began to spike. On his external camera feed, the world was a blur of fire. They were screaming down through the purple clouds of Ethelgard. Flak bursts blossomed around them, orange explosions of superheated gas. Unit 2 is hit, a voice screamed over the comms. Lost telemetry on Unit 2. Elias watched a pod to his left disintegrate, torn apart by a Synod anti-air beam. He didn't flinch. There was no time to mourn. Tighten the formation. Elias ordered, straining against the crushing weight. Target the landing zone at the base of the spire. We take out the guns, or nobody goes home. The ground rushed up to meet them. Jagged crystal formations, sharp as razors, covered the landscape. The Synod fortress sat atop a plateau, glowing with blue energy shields. Brace for impact. The retro rockets fired. Boom, boom, boom. The deceleration was violent. Elias felt a rib groan under the pressure. The pod slammed into the rocky surface, skidding through a patch of crystal shards before grinding to a halt. The explosive bolts on the door detonated. BLM. The door kicked out into the dust. Elias didn't wait. He surged forward, his rifle raised, stepping out of the smoke and into the war. The atmosphere of Ethelgard was thin and bitterly cold. The wind howled through the crystal spires, creating a sound like 1,000 screaming banshees. Elias rolled out of the pod and slid behind a ridge of obsidian rock. Blue beams of plasma hissed over his head, vaporizing the stone instantly. The smell of ozone and molten rock was overpowering. Sound off. Elias yelled into the comms. Miller green. Vance green. Kovic. I'm okay. I'm okay. The Vanguard had landed in a scattered line at the foot of the Synod fortress. Above them, the alien fortification looked like a piece of abstract art. White, flowing curves and floating towers. It was beautiful. It was deadly. The Synod soldiers were already advancing. They were tall, slender creatures, encased in white bioarmor that made them look like faceless statues. They moved with eerie grace, firing their plasmacasters with mathematical precision. Suppressing fire. Elias ordered. Vance, bring up the heavy repeater. Corporal Vance, a man who treated his heavy machine gun like a beloved pet, slammed the weapon onto a bipod. Say hello to the ladies. The heavy rotary cannon spun up. BRRRT. Unlike the clean, silent plasma of the aliens, the human weapon was loud, dirty, and terrifying. High-caliber tungsten slugs chewed through the air. Elias watched as the Synod line faltered. The slugs shattered their ceramic armor. White shards flew into the air as the aliens fell. They were physically superior to humans in every way, faster, stronger, smarter. But they weren't ready for the sheer brutality of kinetic impact. Move up. Fire and maneuver. Elias signaled. He broke cover, sprinting across the open ground. The crystal dust crunched under his heavy boots. He raised his rifle, firing controlled 3-round bursts. Crack, crack, crack. A Synod warrior appeared on a ridge to his right. Elias didn't break stride. He snapped his aim, put 2 rounds into the creature's chest and 1 in its visor. The alien crumpled. Miller, take the left flank. Get grenades into those bunkers. On it. Miller shouted. The battle became a chaotic dance. The Vanguard moved like a pack of wolves, using the terrain, flanking, and communicating constantly. The Synod fought like a computer program, efficient but predictable. When their tactical algorithm failed, they hesitated. And in that hesitation, the human struck. Elias reached the first line of defense, a trench carved out of a solid crystal. He vaulted over the edge, landing in the midst of 3 alien defenders. It was too close for the rifle. Elias let it hang by its sling and drew the combat knife from his shoulder sheath. It was 20 inches of high-carbon steel, weighted for armor piercing. The first alien swung a plasma baton. Elias ducked, the heat singing the paint on his helmet. He drove his shoulder into the alien's midsection, knocking the breath out of it, then swept his blade up under the creature's armpit, finding the gap in the armor. Black blood sprayed across his visor. The second alien raised its weapon. Elias didn't have time to recover his balance. BLM. The aliens had vanished in a red mist. Elias looked back. Kovic stood at the edge of the trench, his shotgun smoking. The kid was breathing hard, but his aim was true. Nice shot, kid, Elias grunted, wiping his visor. Watch your six. Yes, sir. Kovic beamed, the terror replaced by the focus of survival. Commander. Vance's voice crackled over the radio. We have a problem. They've got a walker at the main gate. It's pinning us down. I can't scratch it. Elias climbed out of the trench. He looked up the hill. Standing guard at the massive white gates of the fortress was a Synod heavy walker. It stood 20 feet tall, a tripod of white metal, with a rotating plasma cannon mounted on its head. It was laying down a curtain of fire that was turning the Vanguard's cover into molten slag. Miller. I need smoke on the approach, Elias ordered. Smoke is out, boss. The wind is too strong. Miller replied. Elias grit his teeth. They couldn't stay here. If they stopped moving, the Synod artillery would zero in on them. Vance, keep that thing's attention. Elias said. I'm going for the legs. Commander, that's suicide. Vance yelled. That's an order. Elias checked his belt. He had 2 magnetic satchel charges left. It had to be enough. Cover me. Elias broke into a sprint. He didn't run away from a fire. He ran parallel to it, weaving through the jagged rocks. The walker saw him. The massive turret swiveled, the air humming as the plasma cannon charged. Thump, thump, thump. Bolts of blue death exploded around his feet. The shock waves knocked him sideways, but he kept his balance. He was 50 meters away. 40. Vance opened up with a repeater, peppering the walker's sensors with lead. It wasn't doing damage, but it was annoying the machine. The walker hesitated. Its targeting logic split between the heavy gun and the sprinting soldier. That split second was all Elias needed. He reached the base of the walker. He was underneath the firing arc of the main gun now. The machine tried to step on him, lifting a massive mechanical leg. Elias rolled. The foot slammed down inches from his head, shaking the ground so hard his teeth rattled. He jumped up, activating the magnetic clamps on the satchel charges. He slapped one onto the knee joint of the left leg and the other onto the hydraulic piston of the rear leg. Fire in the hole. Elias screamed, diving away into a crater. He triggered the detonator. Crack boom. The explosion wasn't a fireball. It was a sharp, cutting blast designed to shear metal. The walker screeched, a horrible electronic sound of dying metal. The left leg buckled. The massive machine toppled sideways, crashing into the crystal gate of the fortress. The impact shattered the gate. The door is open. Elias roared, standing up and waving his rifle. Pour it on. Go, go, go. The Vanguard surged forward with a cheer. They scrambled over the fallen walker, pouring fire into the breach. The Synod defenders, seeing their heavy support destroyed, began to rout. They retreated into the depths of the spire. 20 minutes later, the guns fell silent. Elias stood on the ramparts of the captured fortress. He pulled off his helmet, letting the cold, thin air hit his sweaty face. He ran a hand through his short, graying hair. Smoke rose from the battlefield below, mixing with the purple clouds. He looked at his men. They were battered. Armor was scorched. Some were limping, but they were standing. Miller walked up, holding 2 ration bars. He tossed one to Elias. Hell of a run, Commander, Miller said, taking a bite of the dry protein bar. I thought you were toast when that walker tried to dance with you. I don't dance, Miller, Elias said, tearing open the wrapper. I just stumble with style. Elias looked out at the horizon. The Synod fleet in the upper atmosphere was turning. They were retreating. The sector was secure. Get the medics to the wounded, Elias said, his voice turning serious. And set up a perimeter. I want a head count. Already done, Miller said. We lost Jenkins and Sato. 3 others critical. Elias closed his eyes for a second. Jenkins had 2 kids on Mars. Sato was due to retire next month. The weight of command settled on his shoulders again, heavier than the armor. Commander, Kovic called out from the communications console they had set up near the gate. Incoming transmission. Priority 1 encryption. It's the High Archon. Elias frowned. Archon Xylar? Yes, sir. He's hailing you personally. Miller raised an eyebrow. The golden boy himself? Since when does he talk to the grunts? Since we just broke his invincible fortress, Elias said, wiping the grime from his face. He walked over to the console. Put him through. A holographic emitter whirred to life. The image flickered, then stabilized. High Archon Xylar stood in the center of the projection. Even in a hologram, he was unnerving. His skin was flawless violet, his robes woven from light-refracting silk. He looked clean, pristine, a stark contrast to the blood-spattered, dirty soldier standing in front of him. "Commander Thorne," Xylar said. His voice was smooth, cultured, and utterly devoid of warmth. Archon Elias nodded stiffly. "The spire is yours. The Synod forces are in retreat." "I see that," Xylar said, his golden eyes scanning the background, looking at the tired human soldiers. "You have done remarkably well. The Council did not expect you to survive the landing, let alone take the objective." "The Vanguard gets the job done, sir," Elias said. "Yes," Xylar mused. "You are very efficient at violence. It is a uniquely human trait." "We fight to protect the Coalition," Elias said, bristling slightly at the tone. "Of course," Xylar smiled. It was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Hold your position, Commander. I am descending personally to oversee the transition. I wish to congratulate your men in person." "We will be ready, Archon," Elias said. The hologram cut out. Elias stared at the empty space where the Archon had been. He felt a cold knot in his stomach. It wasn't fear of battle. He had mastered that long ago. It was an instinct. The same instinct that told him when an ambush was coming. "He's coming down here?" Miller asked, spitting on the ground. "That's rare." "Yeah," Elias whispered. He looked up at the sky, where the clouds were swirling ominously. "Too rare. Check the weapons, Miller," Elias ordered. "And keep the men on alert. No one rests until we are off this rock." "You think he's going to try something?" Miller asked, his voice low. "I think," Elias said, gripping his rifle tight, "that wars are easy. Politics is where you get stabbed in the back." The arrival of High Archon Xylar was not a military landing. It was a theatrical performance. The clouds above the spire parted, not by wind, but by the displacement of a massive anti-gravity engine. A shuttle descended. It was shaped like a tear of liquid silver, smooth and seamless, reflecting the jagged landscape of Ethelgard in its hull. It moved in total silence, a stark contrast to the roar and rattle of the human drop pods. Elias stood at attention in the center of the courtyard. He had ordered his men to form ranks. They looked like what they were, a pack of tired, dirty wolves standing in the ruins of a crystal palace. Their armor was scorched black, their faces smeared with grime and dried blood. "Stand tall," Elias murmured over the squad channel. "Don't give them the satisfaction of seeing you bleed." The silver shuttle touched down on the scorched landing pad. It didn't deploy landing gear, it simply hovered a foot off the ground, suspended by a hum of energy. A ramp extended, turning into stairs of solid light. First came the honor guard. They were not the standard Synod infantry the Vanguard had fought in the trenches. These were the Praetorians. 7 feet tall, encased in gold and white power armor that looked more like ceremonial jewelry than combat gear. They carried energy halberds that crackled with a low, menacing violet hum. They marched in perfect synchronization, forming a corridor at the base of the ramp. Then Xylar emerged. He was taller than Elias expected. His violet skin was luminous, as if lit from within. He wore no armor, only robes of woven shifting fabric that seemed to change color with his movement, gold, purple, and white. He floated down the ramp, his feet never touching the dirty ground. Elias stepped forward and snapped a salute. It was sharp, precise, and utterly ignored. Xylar didn't look at Elias. He looked at the dead walker tank lying in the wreckage of the gate. He looked at the scorch marks on the pristine white walls of the spire. He grimaced a micro-expression of distaste, as if someone had spilled wine on an expensive rug. "Archon," Elias said, holding the salute. "The 7th Vanguard Battalion reports the objective is secure. Hostiles neutralized. Perimeter established." Xylar finally turned his gaze to Elias. His eyes were solid gold, with no pupils. They were beautiful, terrifying, and completely empty of empathy. "At ease, Commander," Xylar said. His voice was soft, melodious, but it carried across the courtyard without a microphone. "You have made quite a mess." "War is messy, sir," Elias replied, lowering his hand. "War," Xylar corrected gently, "is a failure of calculation. But I suppose for your species, it is the only language you speak fluently. He drifted closer, inspecting the line of human soldiers. He stopped in front of Corporal Kovic. The young man was trembling slightly, awestruck by the presence of the supreme leader of the coalition. Xylar reached out a long, slender finger and tapped the dented chest plate of Kovic's armor. "Crude," Xylar whispered. "Chemical propellants. Hardened steel. It is like watching a primate use a rock to open a nut. Effective? Yes. But elegant? No. It got the job done," Sergeant Miller growled from the line. One of the Praetorian guards stepped forward, raising his halberd toward Miller. "Peace," Xylar waved a hand. The guard stepped back. "The beast is allowed to growl. It has earned its keep for the day." Elias stepped between Xylar and Miller. His hand didn't go to his weapon, but his posture shifted. He became a wall. "These men are not beasts, Archon," Elias said, his voice low and dangerous. "They are citizens of the coalition. They are the soldiers who hold the line while the Senate sleeps in safety." Xylar looked at Elias. A flicker of amusement danced in those golden eyes. "Citizens," Xylar mused. "An interesting concept. You believe that service guarantees value. You believe that because you bleed, you matter." Xylar turned his back on them, floating toward the edge of the platform to look out over the valley. "The galaxy is changing, Commander Thorne. The Synod has been running simulations for 1,000 cycles. We have determined that the greatest threat to galactic stability is not the external enemy. It is the internal variable, chaos, unpredictability." He turned back, his face hardening. "Humanity is volatile. You are passionate. You are stubborn. You defy the odds. In the short term, this makes you excellent shock troops. But in the long term, in a perfect society." Xylar shook his head slowly. "You are a cancer." The silence that followed was heavier than the gravity of the planet. Elias felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He looked at the Praetorian guards. Their grips had tightened on their weapons. "Are you relieving us of duty, Archon?" Elias asked. "In a manner of speaking," Xylar smiled. "You see, the Vanguard has served its purpose. You have taken the spire. You have proven that the Synod's enemies can be defeated. But now, we must ensure that no one questions the Synod's power. And what better way to unite the galaxy than a tragedy?" "A tragedy," Elias repeated. He tapped his finger against his thigh, sending a silent coded rhythm to his squad. "Prepare. Ambush." "The narrative is already written," Xylar said, spreading his hands. The brave Terran Vanguard, overwhelmed by a surprise counterattack. They fought to the last man. They died heroes. The Senate will mourn you. Statues will be built. It will be very moving. "We aren't dead yet," Elias snarled. He reached for his rifle. "No," Xylar said, floating backward toward his shuttle. "But you are obsolete." The ramp of the silver ship retracted instantly. The Praetorian guards did not attack. They simply turned and marched back into the ship, moving with unnatural speed. "Miller, fall back," Elias screamed. "Into the spire. Everyone inside. Now." "They're leaving?" Kovic asked, confused. "Why are they leaving?" Elias grabbed the kid by the harness and threw him toward the bunker entrance. "Move, kid. It's a glassing. They're going to glass the site." The silver shuttle shot upward, accelerating so fast it vanished into the clouds in a heartbeat. "Comms are dead," Miller shouted, slamming his fist against the console. "They're jamming us." Elias looked up. The clouds, previously purple, were turning a bright, angry red. The atmosphere was being ionized. "Bunkers," Elias roared. "Deep storage. Go, go." It started with a sound like tearing canvas, a ripping noise so loud it was felt in the teeth before it was heard in the ears. The clouds boiled away. High above, in the cold vacuum of orbit, the Synod dreadnought Divine Retribution opened its bombardment ports. It didn't use precision lasers. It didn't use tactical missiles. It used kinetic rods, solid pillars of tungsten dropped from orbit. They hit with the force of tactical nuclear weapons, but without the radiation. Pure kinetic energy. The first rod struck the valley floor a mile away. The ground didn't just explode, it liquefied. A shockwave of dirt, crystal, and fire moved outward at the speed of sound. The noise hit them a second later, a physical hammer blow that knocked the standing soldiers off their feet. "Inside. Get inside," Elias grabbed a stumbling soldier and shoved him through the heavy blast doors of the spire's lower levels. The ground shook violently. Cracks appeared in the pristine white walls of the fortress. The crystal spires of Ethelgard began to shatter, raining razor-sharp glass down on the retreating vanguard. "Miller, report," Elias yelled, stopping at the threshold of the bunker. "Vance is down. His leg is pinned." Miller screamed from the courtyard. Elias looked back. 50 yards away, Corporal Vance was trapped under a fallen pillar of obsidian. He was thrashing, screaming, reaching out. The sky turned white. A second rod was falling. This one was targeted directly at the spire. "I've got him," Elias shouted. He didn't think. He ran back out into the open. The heat was already blistering. The air was turning into plasma. Elias reached Vance. He grabbed the massive stone pillar. The servos in his armor whined, red warning lights flashing on his HUD. "Commander, leave me," Vance yelled, his face pale with shock. "Go. We don't leave men behind." Elias gritted his teeth. He pulled. His muscles screamed. The stone moved an inch. "Miller, help me." Miller was there in a second. Together, the two veterans heaved the stone. Vance scrambled free, dragging his shattered leg. "Go. Get to the door." Elias shoved them both forward. They scrambled toward the bunker. The roar of the incoming projectile was deafening now. It was the sound of the end of the world. They reached the blast doors. Kovic was there, holding the manual override, his eyes wide with terror. "Close it," Elias ordered, shoving Vance and Miller inside. "Commander, come on." Kovic reached out a hand. Elias stepped onto the threshold. Then, the rod hit the apex of the spire above them. The impact was absolute. The massive fortress, built to withstand centuries of storms, crumpled like a paper cup. The shock wave slammed the blast doors shut, severing the hydraulic lines. The force of the blast threw Elias backward, away from safety, back into the crumbling corridor. "No!" Miller's muffled scream came from behind the sealed metal. Elias was alone in the collapsing tunnel. The ceiling was coming down. Great slabs of reinforced concrete and crystal smashed into the floor. The floor itself gave way. Elias fell. He fell into the darkness of the spire's foundations. He smashed into a support strut, the impact cracking his armor. He tumbled, hitting the ground hard. Then the mountain fell on top of him. Darkness, silence, crushing weight. Elias tried to move. He couldn't. His legs were pinned. His right arm was trapped. The weight of the debris pressed against his chest plate, the armor groaning under the stress. His HUD flickered. Critical failure. Oxygen levels, 15%. Comms, offline. BIO signs, Unit Vance, terminated. Unit Kovic, terminated. Unit Miller, signal lost. Elias lay in the dark. He could hear the settling of the ruins above him. Millions of tons of rock. He was alive. But he was buried in a tomb of his own making. Rage. It started in his gut, hotter than the plasma fire outside. Xylar. The golden eyes. The smile. Obsolete. Elias keyed his internal mic, even though he knew no one could hear him. "I am not dead," he whispered, the taste of blood in his mouth. He pushed against the weight. It didn't move. "I am not dead," he shouted, his voice cracking. He struggled until his vision swam, until the CO2 scrubbers in his helmet failed and the air turned stale and hot. He struggled until consciousness faded. But as the blackness took him, he didn't think of peace. He didn't see a white light. He saw Xylar's face, and he made a promise to the darkness. "If I get out of this, I will burn your world to ash." Then there was nothing. Pain was the first thing to return. It wasn't the sharp, adrenaline-fueled pain of combat. It was a dull, throbbing ache that permeated every inch of his body. It felt as though his bones had been ground into dust and reassembled by a clumsy amateur. Elias opened his eyes. He expected the darkness of the collapsed bunker. He expected the suffocating weight of the mountain. Instead, he was met with a dim, flickering orange light. The air was wrong. It was thick, humid, and smelled of unwashed bodies, rust, and cheap nutrient paste. He tried to sit up. Metal clattered. A cold, heavy weight tugged at his wrists. He looked down. His hands, scarred, dirty, and familiar, were shackled in heavy durasteel binders. The magnetic cuffs were locked to a rusty bulkhead. He wasn't in armor. His bodysuit was torn, revealing a patchwork of bruises and half-healed lacerations. His chest felt tight, likely a cracked rib or two that hadn't set right. "He wakes," a raspy voice hissed from the shadows. Elias squinted, his vision swimming. He was in a cage. It was a large holding pen, roughly 20 feet square, packed with bodies. He scanned the enclosure with a soldier's eye. There were at least 30 others here. Most were human, colonists by the look of them, soft hands, frightened eyes. But there were others. A massive, reptilian Varaxian curled in the corner. A slender, insectoid Hylital nursing a broken chitinous limb. "Where am I?" Elias croaked. His voice sounded like two stones grinding together. His throat was parched. A figure stepped into the sliver of light. It was a Tellarite, a squat, porcine humanoid with a cybernetic eye that whirred softly as it focused on him. The creature held a shock baton in a three-fingered hand. "You are in the belly of the beast human," the Tellarite grunted. "The Gilded Chain. Slaver transport. Slavers. The scavenger guilds. They followed war zones like vultures, picking through the wreckage for tech, scrap, and survivors." "I am a commander of the Coalition Navy," Elias said. He tried to put the weight of command into his voice, but it came out weak. "You are holding a uniformed officer. This is a violation of the Galactic Concordat." The Tellarite laughed. It was a wet, hacking sound that turned into a cough. He spit a glob of green phlegm onto the grated floor. "The Concordat?" The slaver grinned, revealing yellow, rot-tipped tusks. "There is no Concordat out here in the drift, human. And there is no Coalition Navy." The Tellarite stepped closer, pressing his face against the bars of the pen. "We picked up your distress signal," the slaver sneered. "We dug you out of the rubble of Ethelgard. You were the only one alive in that hole. And the news feeds? They say the entire Vanguard was wiped out. Vaporized. You are a ghost." Elias felt the blood drain from his face. "The others? Miller? Vance? Dead," the slaver said with a shrug. "Or buried so deep even the scanners couldn't find them. You are the lucky lottery ticket. A pristine, combat-hardened human. You will fetch a high price at the pits." Elias slumped back against the cold metal wall. Dead. All of them. The realization hit him harder than the orbital strike. He had failed. He had promised to get them home, and now he was the only one breathing. "Water," Elias whispered. "Earn it," the slaver said, turning away. "We arrive at the Void Market in 6 hours. Don't die before then, ghost. Dead meat is half price." The Tellarite walked away, his heavy boots clanging on the deck. Elias closed his eyes, but peace did not come. Instead, he felt a presence. "You're in my spot, Softskin." Elias looked up. Standing over him was a human prisoner. He was huge, easily nearly 7 feet tall, with muscles that looked chemically enhanced. His head was shaved, covered in prison tattoos from some penal colony on the fringe. "I said move," the convict growled. "I like the wall. It's cooler." Elias looked at the man. He looked at the other prisoners, who were watching with terrified eyes. They were huddled in the center, leaving the convict plenty of space. This man was the alpha of the cage. Elias didn't move. He didn't have the energy to stand. "I'm comfortable," Elias muttered. The convict snarled. "You think because you survived a war you're tough. I've been killing people in the alleys of Nar Shaddaa since I was 12. The convict lunged. He aimed a kick at Elias's injured ribs. It was a clumsy move. Telegraphed. Slow. Elias didn't think. His body reacted on muscle memory, honed by 20 years of close-quarters combat training. He caught the convict's ankle with his shackled hands. He twisted hard. There was a loud pop as the ankle joint dislocated. The convict screamed, hopping on one foot. Elias used the momentum to sweep the man's remaining leg. The giant crashed to the metal deck with a thud that shook the cage. Before the man could recover, Elias dragged himself up. He wrapped the chain of his shackles around the convict's throat. He didn't squeeze to kill. He squeezed just enough to cut off the air. Listen to me, Elias whispered into the man's ear. His voice was cold, devoid of anger. I have killed things that would make you wet yourself. I am tired. I am hurt. And I just lost my family. Do not make me take my grief out on you. The convict clawed at the chains, his face turning purple. He tapped the floor frantically. Elias released the pressure. He shoved the man away. The convict gasped, coughing, crawling backward toward the far corner of the cage. He looked at Elias with pure terror. The other prisoners stared. Elias didn't look at them. He leaned his head back against the wall and closed his eyes. "Wake me when the water comes," Elias said. No one spoke. In the hierarchy of the cage, a new king had just been crowned. The ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace. The sensation was nauseating, a twisting of the gut that made the prisoners groan. "On your feet, merchandise," the loudspeakers boomed. The cage doors hissed open. Elias stood up. His legs were shaky, but they held. He was herded out of the hold along with the others, a long line of misery shuffling through the corridors of the Gilded Chain. They emerged into a massive cargo bay that had been converted into a bazaar of flesh. This was the Void Market, a mobile slave trading hub located in the lawless space between sectors. The noise was overwhelming, hundreds of voices shouting in dozens of languages. The smell of exotic spices mixed with the stench of fear and animal dung. Elias was pushed onto a raised platform. A drone hovered in front of his face, scanning his retinal patterns. Designation: human, male, prime condition. A synthesized voice announced to the room. Combat experience detected. Multiple healed fractures. High pain threshold. A crowd of buyers gathered below. They were a nightmare assortment of the galaxy's worst. Hutts, Batarians, guild masters. They looked at Elias like he was a side of beef. "Move along," a guard prodded Elias with a stun stick. He was moved to a secondary holding pen, a temporary waiting area for those who had passed inspection. In the corner of the pen, a commotion broke out. "Please, I don't want to go." Elias turned. A young human boy, skinny and covered in grease, was being dragged by a Varaxian guard. The boy couldn't have been more than 18, but he looked younger. He was clinging to a metal post, sobbing. "Let go, runt," the Varaxian hissed. "You've been sold to the isotope mines. Stop fighting." The guard raised a heavy, clawed hand to strike the boy. Elias felt that cold ember in his chest flare up again. He stepped forward. "Hey!" Elias shouted. The guard stopped. He turned his slit-pupiled eyes toward Elias. "Back off, meat. This doesn't concern you." "He's a kid," Elias said, stepping between the guard and the boy. "The isotope mines are a death sentence without shielding. You send him there, he's dead in a week." "Not my problem," the guard sneered. "Buyer wants small hands for the machinery." The guard shoved Elias. "Sit down, or I'll melt your brain with this prod." Elias looked at the shock prod. He looked at the boy, who was looking up at him with wide, wet eyes. It was the same look Kovic had given him in the drop pod. Terrified, trusting. Elias sighed. "So much for keeping a low profile." "You touch him again," Elias said, his voice dropping an octave, "and I will feed you that stick." The guard laughed. He swung the prod. Elias stepped inside the swing. He took the hit on his shoulder. The electricity surged through him, locking his muscles for a split second. The pain was blinding, white-hot agony. But he didn't fall. He grabbed the guard's wrist. He squeezed. The Varaxian's bones were hollow, brittle. There was a crunch. The guard shrieked, dropping the weapon. Elias headbutted him. It was a brutal, ugly move. His forehead connected with the alien snout. The guard collapsed, unconscious, before he hit the floor. Elias stood over him, swaying slightly from the electric shock. He looked down at the boy. "Get up," Elias said gently. The boy scrambled to his feet. Thank you. "Hi, I'm Jax." "I'm Elias," he said. Suddenly, the sound of slow, rhythmic clapping echoed through the bay. Impressive. Elias turned. Floating toward them on a hoverchair was a massive, grotesque figure. It was a slug-like creature, draped in velvet and gold chains. His skin was pale and moist, and his eyes were like black beads. This was Moloch, the flesh trader of Outpost Omega. Moloch hovered over the unconscious guard, looking at Elias with delight. That guard cost me 500 credits to train, Moloch gurgled. But you just took a class for shock charge and remained standing. Moloch's black eyes glittered. I was looking for miners, Moloch said. But you are not a miner. You are a gladiator. He pointed a chubby finger at Elias. I will take this one, Moloch announced to the auctioneer. And throw in the boy. Every knight needs a squire. Elias tensed. We stay together? As long as you win, human. Moloch grinned, a hole of rotting teeth. You fight for me. You make me rich. And I will let you keep your little pet. Lose, and I send him to the isotopes. Moloch leaned in close. Do we have a deal? Elias looked at Jax. The boy was shaking, holding onto Elias's arm like a lifeline. He looked at the slavers surrounding them with weapons drawn. He had no armor. He had no army. But he had a mission now. We have a deal, Elias said. Excellent, Moloch chuckled. Load them up. Next stop, Outpost Omega. As they were marched toward a new transport, Jax looked up at Elias. You saved me, Jax whispered. Why? Elias looked at the stars through the hangar bay force field. Because, Elias said, the memory of the fallen Vanguard burning in his mind. I'm tired of watching good men die. The transport ship, Gilded Chain, did not land gently. It slammed into the docking cradle with a shudder that rattled the teeth of every soul on board. Atmospheric seals disengaged, the ship's computer announced. Welcome to Outpost Omega. The cargo bay doors groaned open. Instantly, the heat hit them. It wasn't the clean, dry heat of a desert. It was a wet, suffocating blanket of thermal exhaust, sulfur, and rotting organic matter. The air shimmered with orange dust. Move, move. The Varaxian guards, eager to be off the ship and into the cool air of the guard towers, prodded the line of slaves with electric whips. Elias stepped onto the ramp. He squinted against the glare. The sky above was a bruised purple, choked by thick clouds of industrial smog. A massive red sun hung low on the horizon, looking like a bloodshot eye. Outpost Omega was carved into the walls of a massive canyon. It was a vertical city of rust and misery. Catwalks crisscrossed the abyss. Cages hung from chains over drops that vanished into the dark. Steam vented from pipes, hissing like angry serpents. Keep moving, fresh meat. Elias walked down the ramp, Jax stumbling close behind him. They were herded into a processing courtyard surrounded by high razor wire fences. Moloch floated above them on his repulsor chair, a parasol droid hovering over his head to shield his pale skin from the sun. Process them, Moloch ordered, his voice bored. Miners to the left, fodder to the right, and tag them all. I want my sigil on every piece of merchandise. The line moved slowly. At the front, a medical droid was injecting tracking chips into necks, while a massive brute of an alien, a species Elias didn't recognize, all muscle and gray skin, wielded a branding iron. They're burning them, Jax whispered, his face pale. Look at me, Elias said, gripping the boy's shoulder. Don't look at the iron. Look at me. It's going to hurt, Jax whimpered. Pain is information, Elias said, reciting an old Vanguard mantra. It tells you you're still alive. If you feel it, you can fight it. They reached the front of the line. The gray-skinned brute grabbed Jax first. No, Jax struggled. Elias stepped in, but two guards leveled their shock spears at his chest. Let the boy go first, Elias said calmly. He's scared. Let me show him it's nothing. The brute looked at Moloch. Moloch waved a dismissive hand. Let the gladiator go first. Maybe he enjoys the heat. The brute grabbed Elias's arm. He shoved Elias down onto his knees. Elias didn't struggle. He stared straight ahead, locking eyes with Moloch. The brute pulled the iron from the heating element. The metal glowed cherry red. The symbol was a stylized chain. Hold still, the brute grunted. He pressed the iron into Elias's shoulder. The smell of burning skin filled the air. The pain was white-hot, a searing lance that tried to make his body convulse. Elias didn't scream. He didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He kept his eyes fixed on Moloch, his breathing controlled and rhythmic. In, out, in, out. The brute held it there for 3 long seconds, then pulled it away. Elias stood up. Smoke curled from his shoulder. His face was covered in a sheen of sweat, but his expression was stone. The courtyard went silent. The other slaves stared. Even the guards looked uneasy. Men always screamed. Everyone screamed. Elias looked at Jax. Your turn. Just a sting. Like a hornet. You can take it. Jax looked at the burn on Elias's shoulder, then at Elias's face. He swallowed hard. He nodded. I can take it, Jax whispered. The boy stepped forward. He cried out when the iron touched him, a sharp yelp, but he didn't beg. He took it. When it was done, Jax stood next to Elias, clutching his arm, tears streaming down his dusty face. Good, Elias whispered. You're stronger than you think. Moloch floated down, hovering inches from Elias. You have iron in you, human, Moloch purred. Let us hope it holds up when I throw you to the wolves. The wolves should worry about their teeth, Elias replied. Moloch laughed, a wet, gurgling sound. To the pits with them. The deep mines. Let them taste the dust. Time lost its meaning in the mines. There was no day or night, only the shift whistle. Bzz. Work. Bzz. Sleep. Bzz. Eat. The mine was a labyrinth of tunnels dug deep into the planet's crust. The air was hot and thick with silica dust that coated the lungs and made every breath a struggle. They were digging for iridium crystals, volatile, heavy, and sharp. Elias swung his pickaxe. Clang. Rock shattered. He pulled the debris away with his bare hands, tossing it into the hopper. His body had changed in the 3 weeks since his arrival. The softness of the cryo-sleep and the ship travel was gone. He was leaner now, stripped of all fat. His muscles were hard, corded like steel cables under his scarred skin. His beard had grown out, a rough, dark mask that hid his expression. Pace yourself, Jax, Elias murmured, not breaking his rhythm. Beside him, Jax was struggling. The boy was too small for this work. His hands were raw, blistered and bleeding. He heaved the pickaxe, his breath coming in ragged wheezes. I can't. Jax gasped, leaning against the tunnel wall. It's too heavy. A shadow fell over them. It was the shift boss, a four-armed Varaxian named Scar. He held a neuronic whip. Quitting. Scar hissed. Quota is not met. Dig. Scar raised the whip. Elias stopped swinging. He rested his pickaxe on his shoulder. He turned slowly. He needs water, Elias said. His output is dropping because of dehydration. Give him a drink, and he'll hit the quota. Slaves don't make demands, Scar snarled. He lashed out with the whip, aiming for Jax. Elias moved. He didn't attack the guard. That would get them executed. He stepped in the path of the whip. The energy lash struck Elias across the back. It burned, tearing through his tunic and scorching his skin. Elias grunted, but he didn't fall. He stood there, a human shield covering the boy. He creates more value alive than dead, Elias said through gritted teeth. It's simple math. Scar hesitated. He looked at the human who took a whip, strike like it was a gentle breeze. He lowered the whip. 5 minutes, Scar spat. Then double pace. He threw a canteen at Elias's feet and stalked off. Elias picked up the water. He handed it to Jax. Drink. Slowly. Why do you do that? A deep voice rumbled from the darkness of the tunnel. Elias turned. A massive shape detached itself from the shadows. It was a Togarian, a feline humanoid. 7 feet of tiger-striped muscle and fur. He was missing an ear, and his body was a map of scars. I've watched you, human, the Togarian growled. You take hits for the weak. You share your rations. Why? In this place, kindness is a weakness. In this place, Elias said, picking up his axe. Kindness is the only thing they can't take from us. The Togarian snorted. I am Kale, former general of the Free Systems. Elias, former soldier. Soldier, Kale laughed humorlessly. We are all meat here, Elias. Meat waiting for the grinder. Suddenly, a deep rumble shook the floor. Dust drifted down from the ceiling. The lights flickered. What was that? Jax asked, looking up. Seismic shift. Kale's ears flattened. Deep tremor. Crack. The sound was like a gunshot. The main support beam, a massive timber of reinforced steel, snapped 20 feet away. Collapse, someone screamed. The ceiling gave way. Tons of rock poured down, burying the exit. Panic erupted. Slaves dropped their tools and ran, screaming in the dark. Back. Elias roared. Get back against the wall. He grabbed Jax and shoved him into a small alcove. Kale was right beside them. shielding his head with his massive arms. The dust cloud was blinding. Coughing, choking, Elias turned on the flashlight on his helmet. "Is everyone okay?" Elias shouted. "We are alive," Kale growled, dusting off his fur. "Help, please." The voice came from the rockfall. Elias shone his light. A group of 3 Solarian workers, frail, amphibious scientists who had been sold into labor, were trapped. A massive slab of rock had pinned their legs. The roof above them was groaning, threatening to come down completely. The other slaves watched from the safety of the tunnel. No one moved. "They are dead," a Saurian worker hissed. "Leave them. If we go out there, the roof falls on us." Elias looked at the Solarians. They were screaming. "Hold the light," Elias ordered Jax. He stepped out into the unstable zone. "Human, you are a fool," Kale shouted. Elias ignored him. He reached the slab. It weighed at least 600 pounds. He braced his legs. He wedged his hands under the edge. "Lift on 3. Elias yelled to the trapped Solarians. 1, 2, 3. Elias roared. Every muscle in his body fired. The veins in his neck bulged. His vision went red. The rock moved. 1 inch. 2 inches. Crawl. Move. Elias screamed, his voice tearing. The Solarians scrambled out, dragging their injured legs. It's too heavy." Elias felt his grip slipping. The rock was going to crush his hands. Suddenly, massive, furry hands appeared next to his. Kale was there. The Togarian roared, his fangs bared, and added his immense strength to the lift. Together, the human and the beast heaved the stone upward. "Clear," Kale shouted. They dropped the rock. It slammed down with a thud that shook the floor. They scrambled back to the alcove just as the rest of the ceiling came down, burying the spot where they had been standing. Silence returned to the mine, broken only by the coughing of the survivors. Elias leaned against the wall, gasping for air. His hands were shaking. The 3 Solarians crawled over to him. The leader, a green-skinned male with large, dark eyes, looked up at Elias. You saved us," the Solarian whispered. "Why? We are not your kin." Elias wiped the sweat from his eyes. He looked at Kale, then at the terrified faces of the slaves surrounding him. "We are all kin here," Elias rasped. "We bleed the same." Kale looked at Elias. For the first time, there was no mockery in the Togarian's eyes. There was respect. "Strength," Kale grunted, nodding his massive head. "And honor," Elias replied. The rescue team dug them out 3 hours later. When Elias walked out of the mine, he wasn't just a prisoner anymore. The aliens whispered as he passed. They touched his shoulder. They nodded. He had gone into the dark as a slave. He had come out as a leader. And Moloch, watching from his tower cameras, smiled. "He is ready," Moloch whispered. "Send in the stalker." The sun had set over Outpost Omega, but the heat remained. It radiated from the iron walls of the canyon, baking the air. The arena was not a grand structure. It was a deep, circular pit dug into the bedrock at the center of the camp. The floor was stained with layers of dried blood and oil. Above, on the metal catwalks that circled the rim, thousands of spectators gathered. They were miners, scavengers, and guards, men and women with hard eyes and empty souls, desperate for any distraction from their miserable lives. Elias stood in the holding tunnel. He was stripped to the waist, wearing only rough canvas trousers. His skin was a map of fresh scars and old burns. "You don't have to do this," Jax whispered from the shadows behind him. The boy was shaking. "I do," Elias said, checking the wrapping on his hands. He had found strips of cloth and bound his knuckles tight. "If I don't fight, they send you to the isotopes. And I need you alive, kid." "Why?" Jax asked, his voice small. "Because you remind me of home," Elias lied. The truth was, he needed something to protect. Without that, he was just a killer. And he was tired of being just a killer. The heavy iron portcullis groaned upward. The roar of the crowd washed over them, a wall of noise that smelled of cheap alcohol and sweat. Into the light meat, a guard shoved Elias with a spear, but Elias stepped out. The floodlights were blinding. He walked to the center of the pit and stopped. He looked up. Moloch sat on a private balcony, overlooking the carnage like a bloated king. He spoke into a microphone that boomed through the canyon. "Citizens of the dust." Moloch gurgled. Tonight, we have a treat. A soldier of the core worlds. A hero of the Vanguard. The crowd booed. They hated the core. They hated the clean, rich worlds that forgot them. He thinks he is better than us. Moloch shouted, whipping the crowd into a frenzy. He thinks he is strong. Shall we test him? Kill, 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 the champ began. Moloch pressed a button on his throne. Release the stalker. On the far side of the pit, a massive blast door opened. Darkness spilled out. Then a sound, a high-pitched, wet chittering that made the hair on Elias's arms stand up. An arachnoid stalker emerged. It was a biological nightmare. It stood 8 feet tall on 6 spindly, armored legs. Its body was a carapace of black chitin that glistened under the lights. Its head was a cluster of red eyes and mandibles that dripped with viscous green venom. The crowd screamed in delight. Stalkers were executioners. They didn't just kill, they dismantled. Elias took a deep breath. He centered his weight. Analyze. Adapt. Overcome. The creature shrieked and charged. It moved faster than anything that size should. It covered the 50 yards in a heartbeat, its legs stabbing into the dirt like pistons. Elias didn't run. He waited. 10 feet. 5 feet. The stalker lunged, its 2 front scythe legs slashing down to impale him. Elias dropped. He slid forward on his knees, going under the creature's guard. The wind of the strike ruffled his hair. He drove his fist upward, aiming for the soft tissue where the leg met the thorax. Crack. His knuckles hit hard. The creature screeched, stumbling. But the chitin was thick. It was like punching a tank. Elias rolled away, coming to his feet. Hard shell. Soft joints. Got it. The stalker spun around, hissing. It realized the prey was not helpless. It reared up, exposing its underbelly, and sprayed a jet of green venom. Elias threw himself to the left. The acid splashed onto the dirt where he had stood, sizzling and turning the rock to sludge. Keep moving, Elias muttered to himself. Don't let it target. He scanned the arena floor. Rocks. Debris. A discarded metal pipe from a previous fight. He sprinted for the pipe. The stalker anticipated him. It leaped, soaring through the air to cut him off. It landed between Elias and the weapon. Elias skidded to a halt. He was cornered against the wall. The creature loomed over him, mandibles clicking. It raised a side leg for the killing blow. The crowd went silent. This was it. The kill. Elias looked at the leg coming down. Time seemed to slow. He saw the serrated edge of the claw. He saw the muscle twitch in the beast's shoulder. He didn't dodge. He caught it. His hands clamped onto the sides of the limb, just below the razor tip. The impact drove him to his knees. The strength of the beast was immense. It pushed down, trying to crush him. Elias gritted his teeth. His muscles screamed. The veins in his neck bulged. Is that all you've got? Elias roared. With a primal shout, Elias twisted his body. He used the creature's own downward force against it. He wrenched the leg sideways, applying torque to the joint. Snap. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The stalker's leg broke at the elbow. The beast shrieked in agony, rearing back. Elias didn't hesitate. He leaped. He grabbed the fractured limb and ripped it free from the socket in a spray of black ichor. He held the severed leg like a spear. The obsidian tip was razor sharp. The stalker thrashed, blinded by pain, trying to find him. Here. Elias shouted. The beast turned. Elias threw the makeshift spear. It flew true. It slammed into the cluster of red eyes, punching through the skull and deep into the brain. The stalker went rigid. It shuddered once, twice, and then collapsed into a heap of twitching limbs. Silence. Absolute silence reigned in the pit. Elias stood over the carcass, his chest heaving. He was covered in dust and black alien blood. He turned slowly to face Moloch's balcony. He raised his bloodied hands. Are you entertained? Elias bellowed, his voice raw. The crowd hesitated. Then a single clap. Then another. Then a roar. It wasn't the bloodlust of before. It was respect. They were cheering for the survivor. Moloch stared down, his mouth open. He looked at the dead stalker, a creature that cost a fortune. He looked at the human who refused to die. Moloch began to smile. A slow, greedy smile. Get him out, Moloch ordered his guards. And get the medic. That man is worth millions. The medical bay was cold. Elias sat on a bio bed, wincing as a med droid stapled the laceration on his arm. Tissue damage, minimal, the droid droned. Adrenaline levels, critical. Suggest sedation. No sedation, Elias grunted. I stay awake. The door hissed open. Moloch entered, floating on his chair. But he wasn't alone. A tall, metallic figure walked beside him. It was a protocol droid, but not a standard model. It was sleek, black, with red optical sensors. It moved with the fluid grace of an assassin. This is the specimen? The droid asked. Its voice was synthesized, flat, and terrifyingly polite. This is him, Moloch beamed. Commander Elias Thorne. Or what's left of him. Killed a stalker in under 3 minutes. Bare hands. The droid stepped closer. It scanned Elias with a red laser grid. Physical metrics exceeded projections, the droid stated. Psychological profile. Defiant. Stable. Leader archetype. The droid turned to Moloch. The master will be pleased. We will take him. Take me where? Elias asked, sliding off the bed. He tensed, ready to fight. You have been purchased, the droid said, turning to face him. You are now the property of the Ludus of the Iron Will. Elias froze. He knew that name. Every soldier in the galaxy knew it. That's a gladiator school, Elias said. In the capital. Correct, the droid said. You are going to the core worlds. You are going to fight in the Solar Colosseum. The Solar Colosseum, the heart of the Synod Empire. The place where Xylar lived. A cold realization washed over Elias. Destiny wasn't done with him. It was dragging him back to the source of his pain. I have conditions, Elias said. Moloch laughed. You are property. You don't make conditions. I do if you want me to fight, Elias said calmly. He looked at the droid. You scanned my profile. You know I'm a squad leader. I don't fight alone. If I'm solo, I'll let the first beast in the arena eat me. You waste your money. The droid paused, its processors whirring. Elaborate. I need a team, Elias said. I want the boy, Jax. And I want the Togarian, Kale. The cripple and the runt. Moloch scoffed. Worthless. To you, Elias said. To me, they are unit cohesion. I train them. We fight as a lance. You want a show? You want a champion? Give me my men. The droid calculated the variables. Probability of asset suicide without psychological anchors, 84%. Probability of increased revenue from squad dynamic, 92%. Agreed, the droid said. The Togarian and the juvenile will be included in the transfer. Moloch sputtered. But the payment has been transferred, the droid cut him off. Prepare them for transport. 1 hour later, the heavy blast doors of the spaceport opened. Elias walked up the ramp of the luxury transport shuttle, the wind of Omega whipping his hair. Behind him walked Kale. The giant tiger man looked at his new surroundings, the clean white metal, the soft lighting. You are a strange creature, human, Kale rumbled. You could have left us. You could have saved yourself. I told you, Elias said, looking back at Jax, who was staring wide-eyed at the spaceship. We are all kin in the dark. Elias stopped at the top of the ramp. He looked back at the mining colony, the smoke, the fire, the misery. He was leaving it behind. But he wasn't going to freedom. He was going to the lion's den. He looked at his reflection in the viewport. He saw the brand on his shoulder. He saw the scars. But he also saw the fire in his eyes. It burned hotter now than it ever had as a commander. He wasn't a soldier of the Senate anymore. The Senate had buried him. He was something new, something dangerous. Where are we going, Elias? Jax asked, stepping up beside him. Elias watched the stars streak into lines of light as the hyperdrive engaged. He imagined the face of High Archon Xylar. We are going to the main stage, Jax, Elias whispered. He clenched his fist. We are going to make them remember the Vanguard.